We're going to hear live this morning from several witnesses, so let's put them in context first. David Rivkin, partner at Baker & Hostetler, the estimable and brilliant lawyer here in town who's helped us on many critical days, such as the day of the Supreme Court decision or the day after that. And David was busy at his job yesterday. David, thanks so much. I just want to play you
Great to be with you.
A couple of excerpts. Karen Kenny from the San Fernando Valley Patriots. Just listen up and let's get your first blush impression of this. Go ahead.
We heard nothing until February 2012 when I received a packet from the IRS Exempt Organizations Office in Cincinnati, Ohio, which included a questionnaire with 35 items divided into 80 subpoints of inquiry. A cover letter indicated that we had 20 days to comply without penalty, including penalties of perjury, for failure to answer all questions with facts that are true, correct, and complete. Generally, the questions were a demand that read like the chilling words from the 1950s, "Are you now or have you ever been?" The IRS sought documentation of our meetings, rallies, events, or candidate forums. That included video and audio transcriptions, notes, copies of all handouts, the political parties of speakers, and an issues list. The IRS sought identifying information on employees, data on volunteers and members, plus employer identification numbers on businesses with which we associate. These are our donors.
This is just starters. David, initial reaction?
Totally inappropriate questions, even under IRS's position, which I think is not a correct view of the law. Social welfare organizations can engage in some political activities, provided they spend less than 50% of their resources in that. So most of those questions are utterly irrelevant to the proper determination of whether or not this organization qualifies for a C4 status, and really are harassing and very regrettable.
Let's play Sue Martinick from the Coalition for Life of Iowa, cut number 4, Claude.
In June of 2009, Ms. Richards told me verbally that we needed to send in a letter with the entire board's signatures stating that under perjury of law, we would not picket, protest, or organize picket and protest outside of Planned Parenthood. Upon receiving such a letter, she indicated that the IRS would allow our application to go through.
David?
This is even worse, Bill, because we're talking about a pro-life organization here that even under IRS's crap definition of social welfare organization is clearly engaged in activities that promote their mission. It has nothing to do with politics. This is an effort, if you will, to control what kind of social welfare promoting activities this organization would engage. And remember, there are some restrictions about how you picket abortion clinics. You cannot be too close. You cannot harass the patrons. But there's absolutely nothing unlawful. Can you imagine if back in the 60s you sent such a demand to a civil rights organization saying that we require that you do not engage in the picketing activities, or to a labor union saying you cannot picket an employer during strikes? It would have been front page of New York Times.
Think about this one. I feel a David Rivkin editorial coming. This is Sue Martinick again, Coalition for Life of Iowa. Play cut number 5, Claude.
On June 22, 2009, IRS Agent Richards sent us additional written requests as follows. Please explain how all of your activities, including the prayer meetings held outside of Planned Parenthood, are considered educational as defined under 501c3. Organizations exempt under 501c3 may present opinions with scientific or medical facts. Please explain in detail the activities at the prayer meetings. Also, please provide the percentage of your organization that spends on prayer groups as compared with the other activities of the organization. Please explain in detail the signs that are being held up outside of Planned Parenthood and explain how they are considered educational.
David?
Appalling. As I said,
it's appalling.
And I want you listeners to appreciate, this is nothing more than blatant censorship of of a kind of educational. What IRS is basically saying, as far as we're concerned, the opinions you espouse are not sufficiently scientific, not sufficiently analytically rigorous, presumably about sanctity of life, life beginning, conception, et cetera, et cetera. So therefore, these are not educational activities, and they're not scientific. I mean, it is depressing.
Let's just go back to, because this is the most comprehensive one. This is longer, but I think worth playing again, guys. Let's go to Becky Garrettson. Is this procedure okay with you, David?
Absolutely.
Okay. And because we spent the day listening to this stuff, and so we're highlighting this for you. Becky Garrettson of Alabama, the Wetumpka Tea Party. Let's play cut number 3. This is longer, but full of detail.
Here are the facts of my case. We applied for a 501c4 in October 2010. Our $850 application fee was cashed 7 days later. We received a letter from Robert Cho dated November 2nd, 2010, stating that our application and our user fee payment had been received. It also stated that we should be expecting to hear from someone within 90 days. However, the IRS did not initiate any contact with us for another 459 days. That was when I received a letter from the Cincinnati office dated February 3rd, 2012. That letter stated that they could not process our application until we completed the enclosed questionnaire, which requested approximately 90 pieces of additional information about our organization. The questionnaire stated that if the additional information was not returned by February 24th, our case would be closed. The demands for information in the questionnaire shocked me as someone who loves liberty and the First Amendment. I was asked to hand over my donor list, including the amounts that they gave and the dates on which they gave them. 501c4 organizations do not have to disclose donor information. I knew that. Why don't they? Among the demands that I found alarming and inappropriate were, they wanted me to identify all of my volunteers. They wanted to know if any of our donors or volunteers had run or would be running for office in the near future. Remember, this was the 2012 election cycle. They wanted us to identify the office they would be running for. They wanted us to provide detailed contents of all speeches ever given, the names of our speakers and their credentials. They wanted copies of written communications and contents of all other forms of communications to any legislative body, including my own representative.
David?
I mean, very well. Two things, Bill. Obviously, the delays and then a very short time period, which respond to always voluminous questions as a form of intimidation and harassment, and hopefully a way of shutting down this particular application. Questions, again, are utterly inappropriate. But, again, even under the IRS's view of what political activities social welfare organizations cannot engage, there's absolutely nothing in the law which says you cannot be active in politics in one aspect of your life and then be involved in a social welfare organization another. I mean, this is... what frankly I would have liked to see more from the Republican side, and hope to see it one of these days, is some explanations by IRS. What is the relevancy of these questions?
Yes.
What are we trying to accomplish?
Yes. And when you ask about the content of prayers and what's their educational value,
well, that's even to me. I mean, it's all bad, but that to me is really takes the price for being awful. Because again, Bill, there's no insinuation of any kind that this is political. This is again nothing more than an elitist put down of this kind of speech. Well, you're obviously not rigorous, you're not scientific, you believe in this religious mumbo jumbo.
Yeah. Where comes this notion that it could be defensible, I guess, in under one interpretation, but the thing I played from the Iowa Coalition for Life. Organizations exempt under 501c3 may present opinions with scientific or medical facts. Do you have to have scientific or medical facts to give your opinion?
No, that is...
that is... What is the scientific or medical basis for saying King George has trampled on our rights,
Well, first of all, this is nothing more than an illustration of what kind of opinions can be presented, number one. Number two, the notion that espouse espoused by many pro-life organizations are perfectly scientific. I mean,
Sure.
I mean, I don't think there's much scientific uncertainty about when life begins.
Right.
The questions are really moral, as you and I well know, which is, do we protect that kind of life, or do we record at zero protection? Now, this should be depressing even to those people who are pro-choice, because the government has utterly no business in policing and privileging one kind of educational discourse. Again, we're talking about C-freeze now over and over. And I gave you a couple of examples about if you try to do it to civil rights groups or labor unions, the outcry would have been horrendous.
Yeah. Let me ask her 2 minutes. Can you stay one more segment?
Of course.
Answer questions. I've got this document, and we were trying to get it to you earlier. I guess we had some fax problems, but I still want to get it to you. It is a copy of the cover letters and questions that were asked of one of the witnesses in Tennessee, Linchpins of Liberty. If you read the whole thing, David, it starts out with, very kind of bureaucratic language, and then bang, under penalty of perjury. Other document, follow-up document, it's set aside, set off in the letter, under penalty of perjury. It's in italics. So everyday citizens sitting there, and I mean, I've been there, I've received letters from IRS, and when they say that, you say, boy, maybe I should just withdraw. Maybe I'll forget something, and they'll think I'm perjuring. Perjury is a scary word to a layman.
It is. Well, no, again, look, nobody can doubt that the overarching goal here is to cause these people to go away.
Yeah.
And by the way, very briefly, the thing that irritates the hell out of me, I was not terribly pleased with Republican performance yesterday, and I've seen at least snippets of it, but the Democrats were truly awful. I mean, they were basically, aside from a little bit of a pro forma criticism, spent most of their time defending this. And this is appalling.
We have questions. People are calling in. We'll let folks, if you have a question for David Rivkin, generously going to stay another segment. His partner at Baker and Hostetler, and we're talking about how inappropriate all this was. Just wanted to nail it down, not on my assessment or judgment alone, but on one of the top lawyers in the country, David Rivkin. We'll be right back. William in Dallas is taking exception, I think, to what we're saying. Go ahead, William. You're on with David Rivkin.
Well, a few things your guest said. One thing he's never mentioned is what the statute says. The statute. That's the law. They have to be exclusively for social welfare. Okay. Now, the regulations allow the definition that it has to be primarily social welfare. And the regulations also clearly say political activity is not. Now, many of those questions being asked, there's some that are inappropriate. I'll grant you that. But on the dollars spent and time spent, it is a facts and circumstances question. I would like to ask Mr. Hostetler how the IRS was to know whether or not they were primarily political. Not one of those guests said what their social welfare activity was, number one. Number two, Bill, you asked him a question. Well, why didn't they just withdraw and go home? Number two, if Mr. Hostetler was advising them, he should have told them withdraw because you're automatically tax exempt. He didn't tell you that.
Okay.
That a C-4 does not have to even apply.
All right, hang on. It's Mr. Rivkin. He's with Baker and Hostetler. Go ahead, David.
You asked several questions. First of all, I'm fully aware of the statutory language. It's a fairly basic point. If you're a social welfare organization that, let's say, dedicated to promotion of life, as a couple of those organizations are, the fact that you're engaging in activities defending your position, the fact you're urging the body politic, including the politicians, to espouse policies consistent with that, is not, quote, political. These are activities dedicated to the promotion of your core social welfare activities. And remember, the government cannot say, for example, that promoting, archaeological preservation or restoration of Civil War battlefields, issues that have not become prominent in our political discourse, is a appropriate social welfare goal, but promotion of sanctity of life-related activities is not. It would be totally unconstitutional. Let's agree. Under the current regulations, IRS indeed says that you cannot spend more than 50% of your resources on political activities they define it. My point is that lots and lots of his questions had nothing to do with it. Okay, what prayers you engage in, what kind of volunteers you have working for you, what kind of documents you produce. One could have come up with a very targeted questionnaire directed exclusively at this 50% more or less on political activities. Let's say that these questions were largely inappropriate, at least 70 to 80% of it from the letters I've seen, and even the ones that were appropriate were overly broad. And do you have any doubt that, again, those things were designed to harass the people involved and make them go away, which is not, repeat, not a proper function of our IRS, even if you assume that they were dedicated to enforcing their own regulations in this instance.
Thanks, David, and thank you, William, for your question. You know, one way to say, well, look, these questions are appropriate and they're normal and they're typical, it seems to me, would be to establish that they're asked of everyone. And one way to totally knock the socks off the Republicans here on the committee would be to bring forward 50 witnesses of Democrat groups saying we were treated the same way, same nasty way. Wouldn't you think that they would have done that if there were such a group available?
That's an excellent point, Bill. I don't believe it has happened. Now, it would not surprise me in all the history of IRS's existence may have harassed a few liberal groups. But look, the facts are very clear. This pattern of behavior was in response to the highest level of administrations, in fact, announcing an open season on these types of conservative groups, with the president giving speeches saying that they were un-American, they were engaging in dangerous activities. There was no need for direct order to the IRS. The IRS and other government agencies are very good at reading between the lines and figuring out what is it that their political masters want them to do.
Yeah. Well, no liberal groups were brought forward by Democrats yesterday, even if there had been a few, as you said in the past. But, I mean, the numbers would be so out of whack. Just say a tiny bit more. We just have a minute left on that last point. The president, you don't need to find a telephone call from the president to the IRS saying go after these people. What you saw was him creating an environment in which underlings and a bureaucracy would say, oh, let's help him out.
And, Bill, let's not spare the responsibility of congressional Democrats. Because
sure.
They've written numerous letters. We're talking about the chairman of a Senate Finance Committee, Montana's Senator
Yes.
Marcus, who is an oversight chairman for it. We're talking about Dick Durbin. We're basically have people who are sending letters to the IRS saying, go after them, go after them. IRS understands that they have to be responsive to Congress and not just the administration in power.
Yep. David Rivkin, thank you very much.
Good to be with you.
Okay. Thank you very much. David Rivkin, Baker and Hostetler. We'll be back.